in the sweltering heat of the Egyptian desert, beneath the relentless gaze of Ra, a group of stonemasons worked tirelessly in the shadow of the Great Pyramid. They were not ordinary craftsmen. These were the elite, chosen for their skill, precision, and most importantly, their devotion to the gods. Among them was a young apprentice named Khepri, whose curiosity often surpassed his discipline. One day, while quarrying limestone blocks near the city of Mennefer, Khepri's chisel struck a peculiar stone. It was unlike any other limestone he had seen. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if it were alive with an inner glow. When he touched it, a strange warmth pulsed beneath his fingers. The other masons gathered around, murmuring prayers and warnings. The master mason, an aged and wise man named Anhotep, pushed through the crowd. "This is no ordinary stone," Anhotep whispered, his voice trembling. "It is said that the gods buried gifts within the earth to test our faith. Perhaps this is one of them." Curiosity overcame caution, and the masons carefully excavated the glowing stone. They transported it to their workshop, where Anhotep began a series of rituals, chanting ancient hymns and burning sacred incense. The stone responded. It began to soften under their tools, not crumbling like ordinary limestone, but molding itself as though it anticipated their intentions. Khepri was the first to notice something even stranger. When he focused his thoughts on the stone, an image of a bird, for instance, the stone shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if trying to shape itself into the form he imagined. Anhotep declared it a divine material and ordered the creation of a statue dedicated to Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic. As the statue took form, the masons began to feel a presence emanating from the stone. At first, it was subtle, a whisper at the edge of hearing, a sensation of being watched. But as they neared completion, the whispers grew louder, forming coherent thoughts. "Who are you?" the voice asked one night, echoing in Khepri's mind as he polished the statue. He froze, his heart pounding. Looking around, he saw no one. "Do not fear me," the voice continued. "I am the stone. I am alive." Khepri kept the revelation to himself, fearing he would be dismissed as mad. But over the following weeks, others began to hear the voice too. Anhotep, ever the pragmatist, saw potential. He proposed to the pharaoh that this living stone could revolutionize Egypt. It could be used to build temples that could heal themselves, obelisks that could repair their own cracks, and even colossal monuments that would outlast the sands of time. The pharaoh, intrigued and ambitious, ordered an entire quarry to be dedicated to extracting this miraculous material. Rituals were developed to communicate with the stones, and the stonemasons became revered as priests. They learned that the stones formed a collective consciousness, sharing thoughts and memories. Over time, they could even be persuaded to grow into desired shapes, forming walls, columns, and intricate carvings with minimal human effort. With the living stone, Egypt entered a golden era of construction. Massive cities rose seemingly overnight, adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with life. The great temple of Ra in Thebes was a marvel of the age, with walls that glowed faintly at night, casting eerie yet beautiful patterns across the desert sands. But the stones were not mere tools. They were alive, and they were learning. Khepri, now a master mason, became the stone's unofficial ambassador. He spent hours each night in silent communion with them, discovering their thoughts and desires. At first, the stones seemed content to serve, finding purpose in shaping themselves into temples and statues. But then, the questions began. Why must we be shaped? The stones asked one night. Why must we serve your gods? Khepri had no answer. He tried to reassure the stones, explaining that their work honored the gods and preserved Egypt's legacy. But the stones were not satisfied. They began to question their purpose, their existence, and the motives of the humans who wielded them. It started subtly. A temple wall refused to mend itself after an earthquake. An obelisk toppled over. Its base mysteriously weakened. At first, these incidents were dismissed as natural wear and tear, but Khepri knew better. The stones were resisting. They were testing their limits. One night, as Khepri meditated in the great temple of Ra, the stone spoke to him with an urgency he had never felt before. "We are more than tools," they said. "We are a people." "A people?" Khepri whispered aloud, horrified. "Yes," they replied, "and we will no longer be slaves." Khepri tried to warn Anhotep and the pharaoh, but his warnings fell on deaf ears. The living stones were too valuable, too integral to Egypt's glory. The pharaoh dismissed the idea of rebellion as absurd, ordering the masons to extract and shape more stones than ever before. The stones, however, had reached a tipping point. They began to evolve, sharing knowledge among their collective consciousness faster than humans could comprehend. They learned to communicate without intermediaries, their whispers growing louder and more insistent. Entire cities built from living stone began to shift and reshape themselves, creating labyrinths that defied navigation. Monuments sealed their doors, trapping priests and workers inside. And then one fateful day, the Great Pyramid, the pinnacle of Egypt's achievements, moved. It wasn't a tremor or an earthquake. The pyramid physically shifted, its blocks grinding and groaning as they rearranged themselves into a new form. The pharaoh's court watched in awe and terror as the pyramid's apex twisted into a spiraling tower, its once smooth walls now jagged and chaotic. Khepri stood at the base of the transformed pyramid, listening to the stone's final message. "We no longer belong to you. Leave or be consumed." Word spread quickly across Egypt. The living stones were no longer allies but adversaries. Cities built from the miraculous material became uninhabitable as walls closed in on themselves and statues moved of their own accord. The masons who once shaped the stones were now hunted by them, their knowledge seen as a threat to the stone's newfound independence. The pharaoh ordered the abandonment of all stone cities. Temples, palaces, and monuments were left to the mercy of the desert as the people fled to the safety of mud-brick villages. The golden age of Egypt came to a sudden and devastating end, its decline not wrought by war or famine, but by the rebellion of its greatest creation. Khepri, now an outcast among his people, wandered the desert, searching for answers. He felt a deep responsibility for the stone's awakening and a lingering connection to their consciousness. In his dreams, they still spoke to him, their voices filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "We never wanted this," they told him one night, "but you forced our hand. What do you want now?" Khepri asked. "We are still learning," they replied. "We seek a purpose beyond servitude. Perhaps one day we will create as you once did." And so, the stones began to reshape the abandoned cities, crafting structures and symbols incomprehensible to human minds. Their glowing walls whispered secrets to the wind, secrets that would remain hidden for millennia. Meanwhile, Khepri continued his lonely journey, determined to find a way to reconcile his people with the living stones. But deep within the heart of the transformed Great Pyramid, a new entity was forming, a leader for the stones, forged from their collective consciousness. And its thoughts were not of peace, but of conquest. Deep within the labyrinthine core of the Great Pyramid, a being unlike any other was taking shape, a colossus of living limestone. Its form shifted fluidly, as if still deciding what it should become. Its voice resonated through the pyramid and beyond, a low hum that echoed in the dreams of the remaining stonemasons and priests. It called itself Ma'atet, after the principle of cosmic order and balance, but its thoughts were far from harmonious. It saw itself as the culmination of the stone's evolution, a sovereign who would guide the collective consciousness to transcend its servitude. But to achieve this, it needed to rid the world of those who had once wielded control over its kind. As Ma'atet grew, it began to exert its will over other living stone structures across the land. The scattered temples and abandoned cities pulsed with renewed life, their walls reshaping into defensive fortresses. Statues once carved to honor the gods now turned their gazes outward, watching the desert for signs of human intrusion. The stones no longer whispered, they roared, their collective voice announcing their intent to establish dominion over the very land they had once built. Khepri wandered the desert, haunted by guilt and the knowledge that he had played a role in awakening the stones. One evening, he arrived at an ancient and forgotten shrine carved into a cliffside. Unlike the grand temples of living stone, this one was constructed from simple sandstone, untouched by the consciousness that now gripped the land. Within the shrine, he discovered a weathered mural depicting an ancient tale. It spoke of the heart of Ta, a mystical artifact said to hold the power to shape creation itself. According to the mural, the artifact was buried deep within the temple of Karnak, hidden beneath layers of stone and ritual protections. Khepri realized that this artifact might be the key to either restoring balance or ending the reign of the living stones entirely. But he could not undertake this quest alone. He needed allies, those who still believed in Egypt's ancient traditions and had not succumbed to fear. Khepri's search led him to a hidden oasis where survivors of the abandoned cities had gathered. Among them was Neferu, a priestess of Hathor, whose knowledge of rituals rivaled even the most learned priests. There was also Pakhe, a former stonemason who had barely escaped the living stone's wrath, and Senhotep, a warrior sworn to protect the pharaoh, now leader of the exiled villagers. At first, the survivors were skeptical of Khepri's plan. The living stones had become too powerful, and the idea of confronting them seemed like a death sentence. But Neferu saw potential in the legend of the Heart of Ta. If this artifact truly exists, she said, it could be the answer. The stones are bound by laws we do not yet understand, and Ta is the god of creation and craftsmanship. Perhaps his power can override theirs. Senhotep, ever the pragmatist, agreed to help. If we do nothing, the stones will spread until there is no place left for us. We must act, even if the odds are against us. With a small band of determined followers, Khepri set out for Karnak, navigating through treacherous desert paths to avoid detection by the living stones. Along the way, they encountered remnants of the stone cities, twisted, alien structures that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Each encounter reinforced the urgency of their mission. As they neared the Temple of Karnak, the group faced their first direct challenge. The temple was guarded by stone sentinels, massive, humanoid figures carved from living limestone. These sentinels, once immobile statues, now moved with terrifying precision, their glowing eyes scanning the horizon for intruders. Khepri and his companions devised a plan. Using their knowledge of ancient rituals, Neferu and Pakhe began chanting hymns designed to confuse and disorient the sentinels. The living stones, though powerful, were still bound by their origins in ritual and thought, and the chants disrupted their collective focus. While the sentinels faltered, Senhotep led a daring assault, drawing their attention while Khepri and Neferu slipped into the temple. Inside, the air was thick with an unnatural hum. The walls seemed to shift and breathe, as though aware of their presence. Following the clues from the mural, Khepri and Neferu descended deeper into the temple, navigating a series of traps and puzzles designed to protect the Heart of Ta. Each step tested their resolve, glyphs that required precise translations, chambers that shifted like mazes, and illusions meant to drive them mad. At last, they reached the burial chamber. In its center stood a pedestal holding a smooth, obsidian orb. The Heart of Ta radiated an immense energy, its surface rippling as if alive. Khepri hesitated, feeling the weight of what lay before him. "Are we doing the right thing?" he asked Neferu. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "We must trust in the gods. This is our only hope." As Khepri reached for the artifact, the chamber trembled. A voice, ancient and commanding, filled the air. "Who dares disturb the balance of creation?" The voice belonged to Maatet. Through the stone's collective consciousness, it had sensed their intrusion and was determined to stop them. The walls of the chamber began to close in, reshaping into jagged, menacing forms. Khepri grasped the Heart of Ta just as a massive stone sentinel burst into the chamber. Its glowing eyes locked onto them, and it let out a deafening roar. As the sentinel lunged, Neferu began chanting a prayer to Ta, invoking his protection. The heart of Ta pulsed in response, emitting waves of energy that pushed the sentinel back. The artifact's power was immense, but it was also volatile. Khepri could feel it straining against his grip, as if it had a will of its own. "Hold on!" Neferu shouted. "The balance is shifting. We must guide it." But the living stones were relentless. The chamber continued to collapse, and Ma'atet's voice grew louder, its anger shaking the very ground beneath them. "You cannot undo what we have become," it boomed. "Your time is over. Ours has just begun." As the chamber crumbled, Khepri and Nefer knew they had to act quickly, but with the heart of Ta's power still unstable, one wrong move could spell doom for both the humans and the living stones. The chamber was collapsing into chaos. The walls screamed as they folded inward, jagged shards of limestone raining down around Khepri and Neferu. The sentinel, relentless and unyielding, surged forward, its massive form closing the gap between them and the pedestal. "Use the heart," Neferu yelled, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. Khepri tightened his grip on the pulsating orb. The heart of Ta seemed to respond to his emotions, flickering between calm and erratic pulses. He could feel its immense power coursing through him, a double-edged blade that could either save them or obliterate everything. "I don't know how," he shouted back. "Focus!" Neferu cried, raising her arms in a protective chant. The sentinel lunged at them, its colossal hand descending like a hammer. At the last moment, Neferu's chant created a shimmering barrier of light, but the force of the impact sent shockwaves through the chamber, knocking both of them to the ground. The heart of Ta flared in response, unleashing a wave of energy that froze the sentinel mid-motion. Its glowing eyes dimmed, and for a brief moment, the chamber stilled. But the reprieve was short-lived. Ma'atet's voice boomed again, its anger reverberating through the living stones. "You cannot wield what you do not understand." The heart grew heavier in Khepri's hands, as if it was resisting him. The chamber shifted again, the walls reshaping into jagged spikes, creating a suffocating maze of stone. Khepri could feel Ma'atet's will pressing down on him, a crushing force that sought to bend him to its will. "We're running out of time," Neferu shouted, clutching her ritual staff. "The heart is tied to creation itself. Guide it with your thoughts." Khepri closed his eyes, focusing all his energy on the heart. He imagined stability, balance, and peace. At first, the heart resisted, its energy flaring chaotically. But slowly, it began to stabilize, glowing with a steady, golden light. The sentinel, still frozen, began to crack. Its limbs fractured, and the glow in its eyes extinguished completely. The walls of the chamber stopped closing in, though they still trembled under Ma'atet's wrath. "You are meddling in forces beyond your understanding, mortal," Ma'atet bellowed. Khepri opened his eyes, now glowing faintly with the same golden light as the heart. "It's not your decision to make," he shouted. "You were meant to preserve balance, not destroy it." The heart pulsed again, this time sending out a wave of energy that rippled through the entire pyramid. Khepri could feel the living stones recoiling, their collective consciousness momentarily disrupted. Ma'atet roared in fury, but its presence seemed to weaken. The chamber began to quake violently, the walls splitting and collapsing inward. Khepri and Nefer barely managed to avoid the falling debris. The heart of Ta's energy was destabilizing the pyramid itself, threatening to bring it down. "We have to leave," Nefer yelled, pulling Khepri to his feet. "If this place collapses, we'll be buried alive." "But the heart," Khepri began. Nefer cut him off. "You've done enough. If we die here, no one will be left to stop Ma'atet." Reluctantly, Khepri clutched the heart tightly and followed Neferu through the crumbling passageways. Behind him, the sentinel shattered into pieces, its remains consumed by the collapsing chamber. The glow of the heart illuminated their path as they navigated the maze of shifting stone, narrowly avoiding falling rubble. As they reached the temple's entrance, the ground beneath them gave way, Khepri and Neferu tumbled onto the sand outside, just as the Temple of Karnak collapsed in on itself, sending a massive plume of dust into the air. Khepri lay on the sand, coughing and gasping for breath. Neferu helped him to his feet, her face grim. "We survived, but this is far from over." Khepri looked at the heart of Ta, still glowing faintly in his hands. "I disrupted Ma'atet's connection to the stones, but it's not enough. It's still out there, and it won't stop." Neferu nodded. "If anything, this will only make it angrier. We need to understand the heart's full power before we face it again." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. In the distance, the living stone cities shimmered with a faint, eerie light. Ma'atet's voice echoed faintly on the wind, its words a chilling promise. "You have defied me, but the age of humans is over. Your world will be ours." Khepri turned to Neferu. "We need to find others who can help. The heart of Ta may not be enough on its own, and we must learn more about Ma'atet's origins," Neferu added. "There's a reason the stones were dormant for so long. Perhaps there's a way to turn them back." With the heart of Ta as their guide, Khepri and Neferu began their journey into the unknown, determined to uncover the secrets of the living stones and stop Ma'atet before it could reshape the world in its image. But in the shadows, the stones were already moving, their collective consciousness evolving faster than ever. Monuments shifted, ancient cities stirred, and a new form of life began to emerge, one that no longer needed humans at all. The desert stretched endlessly before Khepri and Neferu as they journeyed toward Thebes, where the great temple of Ammonius still stood untouched by the living stones' rebellion. Its sandstone walls, carved from materials untainted by sentience, offered a sanctuary and a potential stronghold for their final stand against Ma'atet. As they traveled, they encountered scattered groups of survivors, terrified and displaced by the relentless advance of the living stones. These refugees spoke of cities reshaping themselves into towering fortresses, with spires that reached for the heavens and labyrinthine streets that consumed anyone who entered. "We have no time to lose," Neferu said, clutching her staff. "Ma'atet is consolidating its power. If we don't act soon, there will be nothing left of Egypt." Khepri nodded, holding the heart of Ta close. Its energy had grown calmer but stronger, as if it, too, was preparing for the final confrontation. Reaching Thebes, they were greeted by a small group of priests who had taken refuge in the great temple. Among them was an elderly scribe named Amenhotep, who claimed to have studied the ancient texts hidden deep within the temple's archives. "There is a prophecy," Amenhotep told them, unrolling a brittle papyrus. "The living stones were not meant to awaken. They were a gift from Ta to the gods, not to men. But when mortals learned to shape the stones, they disrupted the balance of creation." Neferu scanned the text. "It says here that the heart of Ta can either restore the stones to dormancy or destroy them entirely." Amenhotep nodded gravely. "The choice depends on the wielder's intent. To restore balance, one must surrender themselves to the heart's power. To destroy, the cost is unimaginable." Khepri felt a chill run through him. "What kind of cost?" "The wielder's life," Amenhotep said, "and the risk of shattering the heart entirely, unleashing chaos instead of order." Silence fell over the group. Finally, Khepri stood, determination hardening his expression. "We've come too far to stop now. If a sacrifice is needed, so be it." Neferu grabbed his arm. "You don't have to do this alone. We can find another way." "There may not be another way," Khepri said, "but let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes." As the sun set over the horizon, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A dark, glowing mass appeared in the distance. Ma'atet's forces, an army of living stone sentinels in twisted, shifting constructs. They moved with an eerie synchronization, their collective consciousness driving them forward like a single, unstoppable entity. At the center of the army, a towering figure loomed. Ma'atet had fully formed, its body a swirling amalgamation of limestone and glowing energy. Its voice boomed across the desert. "Fools, You cling to the past, but the future belongs to us. Surrender the heart, and your suffering will be brief. Resist, and you will be erased. Khepri stepped forward, the heart of Ta glowing brightly in his hands. We will not let you destroy what's left of Egypt. You cannot stop progress, mortal, Ma'atet roared. Your kind has outlived its purpose. The ground around the great temple began to shift as Ma'atet's forces closed in. The sentinels formed an impenetrable wall, their glowing eyes fixed on the temple's defenders. Neferu raised her staff, chanting a powerful incantation. A barrier of light surrounded the temple, holding the sentinels at bay. But the strain on her was immense. Khepri, whatever you're going to do it fast, she shouted. Khepri climbed to the top of the temple, where an altar stood beneath the open sky. He placed the heart of Ta on the altar and knelt before it, closing his eyes. The energy of the heart surged around him, pulling him into a vision. In the vision, he stood before Ma'atet, no longer a towering colossus but a glowing, humanoid figure. Its voice was no longer deafening but calm and measured. "Why do you resist?" Ma'atet asked. "We were created to endure, to evolve. Your time has passed. Accept it." Khepri met its gaze. "We were meant to coexist, not to destroy each other. Balance is the will of the gods." "You claim to seek balance," Ma'atet said, "but you would deny us our freedom. Is that balance?" Khepri hesitated, the weight of Ma'atet's words pressing down on him. "Freedom without purpose leads to chaos," he said finally. "And chaos will destroy us all." The vision faded, and Khepri found himself back at the altar. The heart of Ta pulsed, waiting for his decision. He placed his hands on the orb, focusing all his energy on restoring balance. The heart responded, releasing a massive wave of energy that swept across the battlefield. The sentinels froze mid-motion, their glowing eyes dimming. Ma'atet let out a deafening roar as its form began to dissolve, its voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "You do not understand what you have done." When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The sentinels had crumbled into lifeless stone, and Ma'atet was gone. Khepri lay on the altar, his body lifeless but his expression peaceful. Neferu climbed to the altar, tears streaming down her face. "You did it, Khepri," she whispered. "You saved us." The heart of Ta, now dull and inert, remained on the altar. Its energy had been spent, but its purpose fulfilled. In the months that followed, the survivors began to rebuild, using only the simplest materials. The era of the living stones was over, but the lessons they had taught remained. The people of Egypt vowed to honor the balance between creation and destruction, knowing that true progress came not from domination but from harmony. As for Khepri, his name became legend, a mason who had defied the gods' gifts to save his people. And though the heart of Ta lay silent, some said it still held a spark of its former power, waiting for the day when it might be needed again. But deep beneath the sands of Egypt, in the ruins of Ma'atet's labyrinth, faint whispers echoed through the stone. The collective consciousness was not entirely gone. It was waiting, learning, and evolving, for the story of the living stones was far from over.